We just learned from the Washington Post columnist Bob Woodward that the President of the United States has admitted on tape in February he knew about COVID-19, that it passed through the air. He knew how deadly it was. It was much more deadly than the flu. He knew and purposely played it down. Worse, he lied to the American people. He knowingly and willingly lied about the threat it posed to the country for months. He had the information. He knew how dangerous it was. And while this deadly disease ripped through our nation, he failed to do his job on purpose. It was a life and death betrayal of the American people. Experts say that if he had acted just 1 week sooner, 36,000 people would have been saved. If he acted 2 weeks sooner, back in March, 54,000 lives would have been spared in March and April alone. You know, his failure has not only cost lives, it sent our economy in a tailspin. It cost millions more in American livelihoods. This is a recession created by Donald Trump's negligence, and he is unfit for this job as a consequence of it.
The president, just days after having this discussion with Bob Woodward, said this from this podium. On March 30th, he said, "I do want them to stay calm. We are doing a great job. If you look at the individual statements, they're all true. Stay calm. It will go away, but it's important to stay calm." So this president does what leaders do, good leaders. It's stay calm and resolute at a time when you face an insurmountable challenge. That's what this president has done.
It will not appear that the president lied to the American public about the threat posed by COVID.
The president has never lied to the American public on COVID. The president was expressing calm, and his actions reflect that. On January 6th, the CDC issued a Wuhan travel notice before any confirmed U.S. cases, among a number of other actions. And I'd refer you to Dr. Fauci, who said that this president has an impressive response. I can't imagine under any circumstance that anyone could be doing anything more. That is the record of this president. John.
Kayleigh, but how do you square the president's words to Woodward when he said, this is a very delicate one, it's also more deadly than even your strenuous flu, this is deadly stuff. And then just 2 weeks after he told Woodward that, he said, this is a flu, this is like a flu. And of course, he also said it was going to quickly go to zero. But that seems to be in direct contradiction to what he told Woodward.
Well, the president was listening to his medical experts, because you also have at the same time period Dr. Fauci, who said this, asked if the seasonal flu was a bigger concern. He said this on February 17th. So right now at the same time, people are worrying about going to a Chinese restaurant. The threat is that we have in this country, we're having a pretty bad influenza season, particularly dangerous for our children. So he was reflecting that point. And again, days later, in a briefing, he said, the statements I made are this: I want to keep the country calm. That is what leaders do, and that's what President Trump does.
But in that statement, Fauci's not comparing the two. He's not saying coronavirus is like a flu.
It was a COVID interview, and he was asked about seasonal flu vis-a-vis COVID, saying exactly what the president said. And in fact, the president was taking it more seriously, because on the tape he noted that flu could be worse, and he was taking action to address it. Once again, context matters. That 0 reported COVID cases. The CDC was implementing public health screenings. House Dems were preparing to file their first briefs in impeachment. One reported case, CDC, when there was one reported case, the CDC was activating an emergency operations center while Pelosi was releasing a statement criticizing McConnell over impeachment. On January 31st, the president issued a travel ban on China, one that the former vice president called xenophobic. That's what Democrats were doing while this president was acting, and his actions reflect the seriousness with which he took COVID-19. Yes,
Kayleigh,
Jeff.
you quoted Dr. Fauci. Dr. Fauci is also apparently on the record saying of President Trump that his attention span is like a minus number and his sole purpose is to get reelected. That's according to veteran journalist Bob Woodward. I think the bottom line here is that the president, by his own admission in private on the record, acknowledged the depth of this crisis and yet told the American people something very different. How is that at its core not an abject betrayal of the public trust?
The president has always been clear-eyed with the American people. He was always clear-eyed about the lives we could lose. Again, from this podium, he acknowledged that this was serious back in March, that 100,000, 200,000 lives could be lost. And with regard to Dr. Fauci, you're referring to a quote he allegedly told Bob Woodward, and I can give you quotes that we can all play on loop and video of him saying that this response was impressive and he can't imagine anyone under any circumstance doing anything better. Dr. Fauci saying this, I can just tell you the president, the first and only time I went and said, you need to do mitigation strongly, the response was, yes, we will do it. The second time I went with Dr. Birx to the president and said 15 days to slow the spread are not enough, we need to go to 30 days. Obviously, there were a lot of people who had problems with that because of potential secondary effects. Nonetheless, the president went with the health recommendations. So there's a long litany of praise from Dr. Fauci, and you're referencing something he allegedly told Bob Woodward.
It's on tape. It's on tape, Kayleigh.
Well, I'm reading to you what Dr. Fauci has said very publicly for all to see, and we can all play those video clips. I can get them in your inbox.
President
Yes,
Trump
Zeke.
on February 7th says it's deadly stuff about coronavirus. In private, on the record. In public, though, February 28th, he says, one day, it's like a miracle, it will disappear.
Well,
It's one thing to, as a public figure, not to try to incite panic. It's a very different thing, respectfully, to lie and mislead the American people about a crisis that has claimed nearly 200,000 American
No
lives.
one is lying to the American people. One day COVID will go away. I think we can all hope for that day. We will have a vaccine because of this president tearing through bureaucracy to get a safe and effective vaccine. One day it will go away. That is a fact. It is not inciting fear. This president has expressed calmness from this podium, mobilized the greatest mobilization of the private sector since World War II, got more tests than any country in the world on COVID, a vaccine, which, by the way, it'll be a record for a novel pathogen. The timing of this vaccine, should we get it by the end of the year, or should we get it even 3 years, which was the timing of Ebola? This president has done an unprecedented job dealing with COVID, one that Dr. Fauci even acknowledged, and like I said, I will get you that clip to your inbox. Yes.
Kayleigh, you mentioned a few minutes ago that this was an insurmountable problem. I think that's quite a point of dispute. If you look around the world, the United States leads the world in confirmed cases, in deaths from COVID-19. So doesn't the president have their responsibility for that record as well as the testing and the vaccine development that you're just talking about?
No, when you've looked at the rest of the world, in particular the case fatality rate in the United States is about 3%. The world is 3.3%, the UK 11.9%, France 8.8%, Belgium 11.2%, and you can go through the various Western world countries that have dealt with COVID, and we've done a very good job. The case fatality rate notes that, and that's a testament to our therapeutics that the president has navigated.
The U.S. is still towards the very top.
The case fatality rate is the metric that shows how well our response has done with therapeutics, and we are leading the world in having the lowest case fatality rate. It's a very important metric, and one that's a testament, once again, to a president who ripped through barriers, getting us from remdesivir, convalescent plasma, and other very good working therapeutics.
And Kayleigh, you just mentioned the president is very focused on the response there. Then why did the president have thousands of people, many not wearing masks at a rally last night in a state that has limited outdoor gatherings to 50 people? Why is he going to Nevada this weekend to hold similar outdoor rallies, gathering these large numbers of people in violation of his administration's own guidance and of the best advice and guidance of local officials who he has said should have the final say in these matters?
People have a First Amendment right, if they so choose, to show up and express their political opinion in the form of a peaceful protest, which is what the president held. And there's a real double standard here. CNN had on a guest, apparently a doctor, Rob Davidson, who said, now true, there are social distancing issues with regard to the protests we've seen around the country. However, this is a public health crisis. They are marching against systemic racism. So if you're allowed to march in aggregate in those protests, you're also allowed to show up at a political rally. You have a First Amendment right in this country.
Have a responsibility to keep people safe.
Mario.
Thank you, Kayleigh. How can a president bear no responsibility for the almost 200,000 lives lost when he downplayed the virus initially and he knew how contagious and deadly it was? I don't understand how that can...
The president never downplayed the virus. Once again, the president expressed calm. The president was serious about this when Democrats were pursuing their sham impeachment. He was expressing calm, and he was taking early action, and his actions are reflective of how seriously he took COVID.
The tact that he took, the language that he used?
No.
You said that he used hopeful language. Does he regret that, given where we are now?
No, this president embodied the American spirit, that when we face a challenge, a crisis, a pandemic, we come together, we can be optimistic, we can be serious about it, we can take it seriously with our actions, which is exactly what this president does. It's why we lead the world in testing, doing far more than the number 2, which is India. He took this seriously, but he still expressed calm. Our food supply chains were at risk, that we could not have mass runs on grocery stores. The markets, also the economy was in play here. We didn't want there to be a huge crash and panic. He expressed calmness from this podium, but he has always taken it seriously, and the response, an unprecedented response, really reflects that. Yes.
So thanks, Kayleigh. I wanted to ask you about the AstraZeneca trial. So does that throw a spanner in the works that they've halted those trials in terms of getting a vaccine?
All right.